I will begin this video by referencing something I brought up at the end of the last video, the concept of archetypes. In Jung's mind, an archetype is a universal pattern to human existence. For example, every human being has a biological mother and father. That is a universal pattern, an archetype, for human beings. When it comes to caring for a child, depending on how successful the mother and father are, the closer they come to representing the archetypal or ideal mother and father. Now, these archetypes are obviously ones that occur externally. What about the archetypes that occur internally? That will be the focus of the next 3 chapters. The most accessible of the inner archetypes is the shadow. It is easy to access once one accepts that human beings are imperfect and can have negative qualities. All of those contents about oneself that one doesn't like fall into the shadow. The shadow occupies the unconscious realm of our psyche. While not all unconscious contents are shadow contents, like positive memories one might recall, most remain unconscious because they are difficult to integrate into one's conscious being. I briefly referenced something in the last video that I said would be left for Chapter 4, and I still intend to leave the majority of that discussion for Chapter 4, but it's relevant to bring up again. In order for the ego to grow in consciousness, it needs to integrate unconscious contents and bring them under its control. This integration is called the confrontation with the shadow. In successful cases, a human being will recognize a certain negative quality about themselves and either destroy that quality or control it so that the quality doesn't negatively impact their lives. In unsuccessful cases, 2 things might happen. Like I said in regards to complexes in the last video, the shadow has the potential to subsume the ego and bring it under its control. The person then becomes an avatar for the shadow and will do its evil bidding. A good example of the shadow possessing the ego occurs in the film Apocalypse Now. The character of Colonel Kurtz, the main antagonist of the film, goes from being a decorated officer in the US Army to a man that will decapitate those who displease him. For more information on how Colonel Kurtz exemplifies the shadow concept, please refer to my 2-part series on Apocalypse Now, which I will link in the description box. Now, the assimilation of the ego to the shadow is one thing that can happen during the confrontation with the shadow. If the ego isn't assimilated right away, or only partially, the outside world will mirror one's shadow. Now, what does this mean? Well, imagine a person that doesn't succeed well in social situations. That inability to socialize would be a negative quality, one that the person tries to suppress inside their shadow. The natural consequences of this suppression will be its projection onto one's environment. Every time that socially awkward person sees people engaged in conversation, they will become resentful and bitter. They will wonder why the world is so malevolent, why people are so terrible and unaccepting of them. If they were to overcome this pitiful state, they might begin to ask how they might be contributing to the problem, how their lack of personality or empathy might cause people to shy away. Until this happens, however, the shadow will continue its projections indefinitely. Confrontations with the shadow continue throughout one's life. These confrontations range from very simple moral lessons to ones that are impossibly bleak. Despite that unfortunate psychological fact, confrontations with the shadow are necessary. There needs to be an unconscious realm to give dimension to the conscious realm. Otherwise, neither can exist. It's like if light were to exist without darkness, or darkness without light. It's an impossibility. Jung theorized that in order for the ego to grow to its highest peak, the Jungian self, one must confront all of the contents of one's shadow. Only then can one's psychological and physical being achieve perfect balance of the opposites, conscious and unconscious, good and evil, etc. Now, in regards to what Jordan Peterson might find terrifying about this concept, I believe it's self-evident. The notion that there must always be a negative shadow side to every aspect of life, that there has to be a greater darkness to permit greater light, and that we have to encounter it at some point, is nightmarish. At some point, we will all have to be like Winston Smith in 1984, facing the possibility that his face might be eaten by rats. At some point, we will have to be like Kurtz, choosing whether to be a friend or enemy of horror. At some point, we will have to be like Jesus, and face the most brutal of deaths, despite our innocence. If we don't, we risk being assimilated by the shadow, and all of our work in favor of the good becomes null and void. In the next chapter, we will discuss another archetype of the unconscious mind. The shadow is a sort of general term that encompasses a large amount of unconscious contents. There are specific sections of the shadow that belong to specific archetypes. Two of those unconscious archetypes are the anima and the animus, also known as the syzygy. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a like. That really helps me out a lot. Make sure to subscribe so you can see future videos in this series. Also, if you want to support the work I'm doing here, please consider going over to my Subscribestar page. There are different rewards you will receive depending on how much you donate. If you don't have the capacity to leave a donation, that's totally cool. Really, the most important thing you can do to help me out is share this video. Share it with a fellow Jordan Peterson fan or Jung fan so we can come together and talk about stuff that is intelligent and meaningful for a change. Also, remember to subscribe to both Uberboyo and Jemmyboyo for more discussion around Aion and other Jungian content. I'll leave a link to their channels down below in the description box. Until next time, stay yellow.